You're standing in a market 3,000 years before the first coin was ever struck. You have 3 goats. The man in front of you has grain, but he doesn't want goats, he wants pottery. The potter 2 stalls down wants goats, but not from you specifically, only from a man who owes him a favor. You need something that everyone agrees is worth something, and right now, nothing is. This is the story most of us were taught. Humans got sick of this mess, sat down, and invented money to fix it. Clean, logical, almost too convenient. It's also, according to decades of anthropological fieldwork, mostly fiction. In 1985, Cambridge anthropologist Carolyn Humphrey studied dozens of documented barter-based societies and found something the textbooks didn't want to admit. A pure barter economy, strangers trading goods directly, no money involved, has almost never been observed as the primary system anywhere on Earth. Not in Mongolia, not in the Amazon, not in the ancient world archaeologists have dug through for over a century. So if humanity wasn't trading goats for grain and getting frustrated into inventing coins, what actually happened? Debt happened first. Clay tablets from Mesopotamia, dating back to roughly 3000 BCE, show something startling. Long before a single coin existed, temple economies were already running on credit. You didn't need to pay the baker with fish on the spot. You owed him. He wrote it down. The tablet was the memory, and the memory was the money. Read that again. Money didn't begin as an object in your hand. It began as a promise someone else was willing to remember. That single idea, that value could live in trust rather than in metal, is stranger than it sounds, and it's about to get a lot stranger. Because once humans figured out that memory could function as currency, they started experimenting with what else could hold that same power. Shells, salt, livestock, stone discs the size of a car tire. One of those experiments is still technically in use today on a Pacific island where nobody has ever seen the money they're spending. On the island of Yap in Micronesia, there are stone discs called rai, some over 3 meters wide, carved from limestone that doesn't even exist on Yap itself. It was quarried on Palau, 400 kilometers away, and hauled back by canoe. A single disc could represent enormous wealth. Here's the strange part. Ownership could change hands without the stone ever moving. Economist Milton Friedman wrote about this in 1991, describing a rai disc that sat at the bottom of the ocean, lost during transport centuries earlier. Nobody retrieved it. Nobody needed to. The entire community simply agreed that the family who'd paid for it still owned its value, sunk or not. Sit with that. The stone was never the point. The agreement was the point. And once you see that, you start to understand layer 2 of this whole mystery. Money isn't a thing. It's a shared belief that happens to sometimes take a physical shape: metal, shell, stone, ink on cotton paper. Belief needs backing, though, and that's where layer 3 gets uncomfortable. Early coinage, appearing in Lydia around 600 BCE, wasn't primarily built to serve merchants. Historian and anthropologist David Graeber argued that the timing lines up too well with something else: standing armies. A king mints coins, pays soldiers with them, then demands taxes back in that same coinage. Suddenly, every farmer, blacksmith, and baker in the kingdom needs coins too, not because they trust the metal, but because the alternative is prison or worse. Money, in other words, may have spread less through convenience and more through coercion. That reframes everything you thought you knew. The goat and grain story was never really about 2 neighbors solving an awkward trade. It was about temples, kings, armies, and the slow, deliberate construction of systems that made trust or fear physically portable. But belief and coercion only take you so far, because somewhere in this history, something had to actually make one specific object feel unquestionably real, permanent, official, the kind of object nobody thinks to challenge. That object was about to become the most fought-over invention in human history. That object was gold. Not because gold does anything useful. It doesn't rust, doesn't corrode, doesn't feed you, doesn't build a house. Its entire value comes from a strange combination of scarcity and universal desirability, a coincidence of chemistry that made it hard to fake and impossible to manufacture more of on demand. Layer 4 is this: money works best when it's difficult to counterfeit and impossible to conjure out of thin air. Gold satisfied both. Empires didn't choose it out of tradition, they chose it because it was quite literally the hardest thing to cheat with. But scarcity creates its own problem. You can't carry a kingdom's wealth around in a wagon of gold bars forever. So, Layer 5 arrives, and it's the one that should genuinely unsettle you. The Republic of Venice, and later the Bank of England in 1694, began issuing paper promises to pay gold instead of the gold itself. People started trading the paper. Nobody was walking to the vault anymore. We stopped trading value. We started trading trust in an institution's paperwork. None of this means the system is untouchable, though. In 1997, Albania collapsed into near civil war after pyramid investment schemes, built entirely on the public's misplaced trust in guaranteed returns, wiped out the savings of roughly 2/3 of the population. Banks failed, government fell, riots left over 2,000 people dead. It remains one of the starkest modern reminders that money, stripped of trust, is just paper and stone and metal again. That collapse didn't disprove the system, it proved it. Trust, once broken at scale, doesn't bend, it shatters completely, and everything built on it goes down with it. Albania didn't fail because money is fragile by nature. It failed because an entire population, for one specific moment in history, mistakenly extended their trust to something that didn't deserve it. Which raises a question far bigger than gold or coins or stone discs sitting at the bottom of the Pacific. If money was never really about the object, if it was always about what we agree to believe together, then what does that make the numbers sitting in your bank account right now? Here's the final layer, and it's the one that changes how you'll see every transaction for the rest of your life. Over 90% of the money in modern circulation doesn't exist as physical currency at all. According to Bank of England research published in 2014, most money today is created the moment a bank issues a loan, a number typed into a ledger, backed by nothing you could hold in your hand. No gold vault, no stone disc, no paper promise sitting in a drawer. Just a shared agreement moving at the speed of a keystroke. We like to imagine money as the most solid thing in our lives, the thing that's real when everything else feels uncertain. But you've just watched it shapeshift across 5,000 years, a clay tablet, a sunken stone, a coin minted for war, a paper promise, a number in a database. The object kept changing. The one thing that never changed was us agreeing together to believe in it. Go back to that market now. 3 goats, a man who wants pottery, a potter who wants nothing you have. You used to think the problem was that nothing there was worth anything, but that was never true. Everything in that market was worth something. The goats, the grain, the pottery, all of it. What was missing wasn't value, it was a story everyone in that market could believe at the same time. That's what you're holding every time you tap a card or glance at a balance or hand someone a note. Not wealth, not metal, a story so many people believe together that it becomes real. You've never spent money in your life. You've only ever spent trust.